Hello and welcome to Midgard's Storytime. Tonight we'll be reading The Outersphere Warlords 1000 Cuts, followed by a brief excursion into the fantasy novel that is a work in progress. But yes, we are here and ready. Here we are, and welcome to The Outersphere Warlord Monologues 1000 Cuts. There are a few truths you should always remember to get you through the darkest moments in your life. Life is endless in its capacity to surprise. Life will carry on regardless. Your capacity for good is equal to your capacity for evil. Might makes right. And finally, your uncle loves you however you turn out. Unless you end up with the Peacekeepers, then you are dead to me. This was the last thing my uncle said to me right before they arrested him for various crimes, not limited to, but including grand larceny, murder, arms trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, standing in traffic while trafficking, grievous bodily harm, bribery, blackmail, breaking and entering, impersonating an officer impersonating his superior, assaulting the officer that he was impersonating with a wet fish, petty theft, prostitution, fraud, money laundering, armed assault, ethnic cleansing, sodomizing a goat, and arson. Although he always says that petty theft was a trumped-up charge. I only mention him really as he is due to be released sometime after the universe collapses and disappears up its own arse, mainly due to his behaviour since being sent to the prison planet of Bor. That is, he took over. I also mention him because we are literally flying over the planet Bor as I write this, while we're being chased by a 1,000-strong army of angry space pirates. Have you ever noticed that there are never any peacekeepers available when you actually need them? Sure, they show up when your hold is full of apparently illegal and possibly illicit goods, but a few space pirates turn up and you never see a peacekeeper for love nor bribery. That and the fact that my dearest daughter, Charlie, the current head of the peacekeepers, in case you'd forgotten, had put a black mark against us getting any help after we may or may not have raided her supply ammunition dumps to replenish our good friends and her mother's, Sybil's, army, the Black Claw, of which we take no responsibility. Unless Sybil is reading this, in which case you're welcome. Where was I? Ah, yes. The planet Bor. The prison planet of Bor is basically a planet made up entirely of endless skyscrapers, city blocks. Each block is identical, and each building has the same decor. Hello, pause. Food is dropped off in an ad hoc manner, and the place is barely maintained apart from the occasional raids by automated cleaner decorator robots that make sure everything stays the same. There is a reason it's called Bor. It's fucking boring. It was the brainchild of some Spartan fuck who thought the best way to make someone not want to commit a crime was to drop them off in the most boring place in the universe. Even the stars at night are blocked out by a grey mist that envelops the whole planet. Okay, it's not the most boring place in the universe. That particular honour is saved for the Smack-Division Bungle Game Studios, where Derpstiny 663 The Groaning is currently under development. I am pretty sure that if Derv had been alive when the planet Bor was being built, they would have hired him to do a series of impromptu interviews about the benefits of using one wax over another when polishing the lens of your sight finder, and which hair care product is best for getting stains out of your loincloth. Like they did with Derpstiny 662, the fattening. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was one of Derv's ancestors that came up with the idea for the planet Bor, come to think of it. Anyway, our shields are down. Our weapons are down. Hell, even the coffee machine is down. And that's not the worst of it. Our instant ramen noodles ran out 3 days ago, and Derv has made a compelling argument for his staying on Bor for the rest of his existence due to his constant complaining. At the very least, his jettisoning out into outer space, out of the nearest airlock. If Any of the airlocks were actually working, that is. Hell, if he complains one more time, I may just shoot the front window out and throw him out of that, and damn the consequences. This whole mess started after a group of intergalactic space pirates decided that the outer sphere would make a decent place to put their heads down before heading out on some more raids. This, of course, conflicted with Anne and Sybil's desire for the people of the outer sphere to be free. At least free from external meddling. Hence why we were sent to negotiate with the head of the pirates, which went about as well as you can expect, considering our penchant for accidentally murdering pirate leaders. The whole situation reminds me of the time I was sent on a team-building exercise when I was first in the Peacekeepers. At the time, most of the Phalanx guys were still recuperating from their injuries at the front incident, and since I was still fully capable, they put me to work in a division called Reclamations, which was fancy talk for stealing stuff from folks who had already stolen the stuff from other richer folks who had likely stolen the stuff in the first place but had better lawyers. Anyway, me and a couple of the other guys had questioned one of the higher-ups' orders to assault that compound, as it was clearly well defended and this was seen as disobeying orders. That and the fact that I'd head-butted said commander got us into some hot water and resulted in one of my first interactions with Internal Affairs. Not my first interaction with Internal Affairs, that was over the shooting of one of my fellow officers for touching my gun, but the one of the first interactions that required one of the union reps being called in to mediate, and didn't require the cleaners to come and clear up the mess, and more cleaners to come in and clean up the vomit left by the previous cleaners. It took weeks to get the smell out of the armory. The union rep, a guy called Clive, still around last I heard, nice guy, bit creepy, came up with the idea of sending the whole division off on some team-building exercise on the jungle planet of Pain. About as apt a name for a planet as you can get, to be honest. We arrived and got dropped off on one side of the planet with one goal: to get to extraction. We had little to no tech with us, save for our guns, which me, Derv, and Callie had a lot of, a tent each, and about a day's worth of food. It was really just a shame that Benny was left in charge of the food rationing when we set off, as he had finished pretty much everything off before we even picked up our packs, which I had predicted would happen when the jobs list was read out, but our illustrious commander had decided was nonsense, and that there is no way one man could possibly eat 120 people's rations. I have never seen someone so full of themselves eat so much humble pie in my entire life. Or at least, he would have done if there was any humble pie left. It also just happened that, at the time, the planet had become overrun with a pirate group who were using the place as a hidey hole from us peacekeepers. It just wasn't their day. The first group of pirates we came across didn't realise we were peacekeepers at first, and thought we were just another group of pirates who happened to be there with no food, and a very large man who looked very hungry indeed. They only realised the error of their initial judgment after our, again, illustrious commander demanded that they hand over their ill-gotten gains or face the wrath of the peacekeepers. He got shot rather quickly when he said this, and I'm pretty sure wherever he ended up, he is still trying to figure out if they listened to him or not. Needless to say, Clive took over from that point onwards. He reprimanded me for shooting the commander. He decided that it might be a good idea to stay incognito, at least until we ascertained the number of pirates that we were up against. His idea of being incognito was to make us all wear the clothes of the pirates we had just killed, and to try and blend in. He said, "I know it will be hard, but you must try and put yourselves in their shoes, their desperation, their longing for acceptance, their desire to..." We'd all gotten clothed at this point, and he kind of stopped dead and said, "Right, yes, very good. You have their character right down. I almost didn't even recognize you through all the blood, guts, oil, and dirt. We were very good at blending into our surroundings. Partially as we were all very good at playing the part of no good, down and dirty pirate types, and partially as most of us had been no good, down and dirty pirate types before joining the Peacekeepers, also known as the Phalanx. After a short stop in the pirate base, where Benny ate the last of the food that the pirates had left behind after their timely demise, we hungrily headed out looking for the next pirate base. Benny was the first to spot the hangar that was camouflaged with optical camo. I say spotted. You couldn't actually tell that there was a camouflaged hangar there, even if you looked really carefully. But he spotted the smell of cooking coming from the galley. I swear that man sees in full Ultra HD smell-o-vision. He once found a grain of rice down the front of his dirty-ass shirt. It might not sound it, but that's impressive. Hell, I couldn't even find the shirt the last time I looked. Anyway, the guards shouted out to us as we approached. "What's the password?" We looked at one another for a moment before all shouting at once, "Password?" To our great surprise, the guard smiled and let the optical camo drop, revealing a huge structure built into the forest and surrounding a worse-for-wear pirate carrier. The guards waved us in, and we started to get the lay of the land, as it were. That is, we went straight for the bar. It might not sound like a great idea, but you can always get the best idea of what's what when entering a pirate base by taking the time to look through the bar. It's also the largest part of any pirate base, so you really can't miss it. Callie and Benny went off looking for the galley, while me and Derv sat about getting to know the locals. The rest of the Peacekeepers followed our lead. Clive started looking the ship over and trying to assess its capabilities and how it could be blown up quickly. He really didn't need to spend all that time looking about and poking at things, trying to fit in and being all sneaky-like. All that was needed to get the carrier to blow was to let Callie investigate the armory, which is what we did. I say we let her. It was more a case of, oh shit, she found the armory. Sure enough, there was a big smouldering hole where the carrier used to be, not long after Callie was allowed to discover its whereabouts. We did learn some important information when we were there, though. Firstly, we learned that the pirates were all part of a galactic super pact pirate gang, or jizzers, as they preferred not to be called. Or at least that's what the other gangs called them behind their backs anyway. Secondly, we found out that the whole gang was here planetside, and that there were about 1,500 crews dotted about the planet, each with enough firepower to turn a carrier into a smouldering mess of a crater if Callie got her way, which she did several times. Even after we asked her nicely if she could not do that while we were still inside them. Her response was to stand there for a moment, think about the pros and cons of the arguments for and against it, and come to a sensible decision. Actually, she didn't do that. She just said no, followed by us jumping out of the nearest window as the whole thing went sky high. Thirdly, we discovered that they were under new management, and that the new head honcho was rapidly modernizing the ships they were using. And that's why they were all sat around in this jungle planet, not really doing much pirating and getting very bored of it. Apparently, the local wildlife, while utterly deadly, didn't seem to offer much in the way of swag, loot, or booty. Though one or two of the pirates had lost their lives trying to get their ends away in some of the local wildlife's booties. I say one or two. These were mostly men and the occasional women who had been starved of sexual contact for over 13 months. Though it's very hard to tell the difference between male and female pirates. I guess you could have a go by the beard length. Usually the longer the beard, the more likely it is that they took better care of themselves. So we're more likely female, I think. Trust me, it's best to never ask. They are very self-conscious when it comes to sexuality. It's best to just say matey whenever a gender type is needed. Quick side note, It seems that everyone thinks pirates speak in weird ways and say things like "pieces of eight" and "arr, me hearty." They in fact speak exactly like this. It's very confusing. Having a conversation with a pirate takes almost as long as a White Petal Corp morning briefing and consists a lot of rum, a lot of "arr" and "yar" and the occasional laughing maniacally, the occasional fistfight, and lots of vomiting. This results in an almost impenetrable layer of code to sort through when trying to find out anything much about anything, which is probably why they still manage to survive today. Anyway, I cannot stress how impressive it was that we got any information out of these guys at all, especially since most pirates are completely unaware that a conversation should involve more than simply shouting weird noises, offering parrots bits of crackers, and peg legs being slapped and sabres waved about in as animated fashion as one can muster, all while being blindingly drunk on 200 proof space rum, the stuff they used to clean the reactors being considered too weak by comparison. Over half of the Peacekeeper force that we landed with ended up in an alcohol-induced coma by the time that Benny and Callie had arrived at the galley. And most of the rest ended up unable to stand, let alone figure out which end of their shooty sticks was supposed to be pointed at the pirates when we attempted to arrest them. Not that the pirates actually noticed that we were arresting them. In fact, several of the pirates thought the chining up of their colleagues was a jolly wheeze and joined in. I'm pretty sure that we went home with more peacekeepers than we arrived with, even with the several losses we suffered when Callie discovered the armory without warning anyone else about it. I was lucky enough to escape, as I had heard the maniacal laughter coming from Callie's last known location right before the first explosions happened. You would also be surprised to hear that instead of being mightily pissed off by the fact that someone had just reduced their ship to scrap, most of the pirates simply raised their flagons and cheered, fell about, avoiding the falling, burning shrapnel, and went back to the jolly wheeze that was chaining each other up, all while drinking like fish. The first couple of bases that we came across fell in much the same manner until we had a chain gang of drunken pirates laughing and rolling about, following the guy in front, who was in turn following the guy in front of him. That was over 2 kilometers long. When we reached a new base, the request for a password was always met with some random collection of numbers or words, most of which followed the same general formula of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or passcode, or my favourite, fuck knows. We began to suspect that there wasn't actually a password that anyone had agreed upon, or that the guards were too drunk to remember what the password was, so just settled on the assumption that no one in their right minds would come swaggering into a pirate base who wasn't one of the pirates. One of the guards even opened the optical camo as we approached and whispered to one of us, "What's the password I'm supposed to be asking you for?" Before closing the camo down and asking for the password we had just given him. They weren't the smartest cookies in the cookie jar. In fact, they were more like the broken crumbs usually thrown out of the cookie jar after months of just topping the thing up with fresh cookies, only to realise that most of the cookies had become a wet, soggy mess and turned to a rotten mush at the bottom. That said, the guards were highly respected, mainly as they were the only ones who could stay upright for more than 2 seconds, which is why they were promoted to guard duty in the first place, even if some of them had 2 patches over both of their eyes, making them useless in every respect. One guard had 2 hooks for hands, 3 peg legs, 2 eye patches, and had lost both of his ears in some fire a few years back. Turned out he was the head guard for that particular camp, because he could stay standing long, even after drinking toxic levels of rum for a pirate. It turned out to be because his peg legs weren't from the knees down, but from the hip down, so that he was always standing regardless. This also turned out to be a point of pride for him, or at least I think that's what he said. All I could understand was, "Yar, ar, Polly, ar, yar, ar, har, 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 har." At least he didn't complain much when we chained him up and placed a couple of bottles of rum with pipes heading to his mouth and placed him on a grav lift to wheel him about in. He now has his own alcoholic breakfast cereal. Quite popular back in the centre it is. It's called Captain Scrunched. Everything was going swimmingly, right up until the point that we came across the only part of the planet that wasn't covered by jungle, and realised that the head honcho had imposed a no drinking policy on her own base. This made for some very cranky pirates indeed, and as soon as they saw our chained conga line heading towards them, they raised the alarm and started shooting. Not that any of the pirates in the conga line noticed much. In fact, they even started singing a shanty song that went something like this. 300 pirates chained in a line, 8,000 drunken pirates. A shot is heard, it drops a turd. 1,997 drunken pirates chained in a line. 601 drunken pirates chained in a line. 783 drunken pirates. A shot was heard, it dropped a turd. 11,202 drunken pirates chained in a line. It brought tears to one's eyes to see a group of people so happy that one of their own had just been shot. Pirate rum is amazing stuff. Anyway, we hit the ground and started shooting back. There were bullets ringing through the air for a good 3 hours, several deaths to be had on both sides. In the end, the head honcho came down to see what all the ruckus was and shouted out to everyone, "Please, could everyone stop getting shot?" and complained terribly of a bad headache from all the singing from the 7,023 drunken pirates chained in a line. It didn't help that pirates are terrible at math, and that they seemed to get louder the less of them that were left standing. Anyway, after realising she only had a few people left and that the peacekeepers seemed to have turned over half of her drunken pirates into drunken peacekeepers, she ordered the rest of her guys to mount up, and off they took in their carrier, never to be seen again. Or at least, that's how the story should have ended. But what actually happened is that she came back with about 20,000 more troops, most of which were mercenaries from deep in the dark clusters. What followed was about 3 days of running and gunning and avoiding local wildlife, all while dragging a slowly depleting number of pirates around on a chain, while trying to keep them drunk and pliable. Clive, to his credit, kept his head very well and managed to get a message out to the peacekeeper fleet that was stationed nearby. This resulted in the peacekeeper fleet shooting at the bad guys shooting at us, and us running from base to base grabbing whatever munitions and rum we could, all while this conga line of drunken pirates hooted and laughed at every explosion. It was pure, unadulterated chaos, and we loved every minute of it. This was one of the few occasions where we actually enjoyed Derv's company as well. Mainly as he didn't have time to say a single word as he was shooting the whole time. He didn't even complain that he hadn't had any ramen the whole time we were there. Great times. The head honcho eventually surrendered and handed herself in to me and Callie after we blew up most of the remaining troops she had brought in. She put up a white hanky on the end of her gun and waved it while screaming for a parley! She was a squirt of a girl. She'd been the pirate's plaything until she got pissed off at being passed around and took over the gang by herself a few months prior. She'd earned a name for herself as a clear thinker. Probably she didn't drink the bilge water the pirates were, and had quickly earned the respect and fear of several smaller pirate gangs with her vicious and callous tactics. Thank you very much, Josh. Very much appreciated. She earned a reputation for being uncompromising and violent, and ran roughshod over several local settlements. Anyway, as she sat there, waving the parley flag at us, as we approached through the still smouldering wreckage of her ship, Callie smiled, held out her hand, then placed a box with a cooked grenade in the poor girl's outstretched hands, and ran away giggling. We never did find the rest of her body. We just call her Head Honcho in all of our reports, as none of us could actually say what her name was. It might have been Polly for all I know. Actually, it probably was Polly. Most pirate women are called Polly, as are their parrots. I guess it's just easier to remember. And I suppose that way, if you ask if Polly would like to go out on a date with you, and Polly ends up being a guy pirate, you can just say that you were asking the parrot out, which doesn't get as many weird looks as It should, I might add. A few years later, we discovered that the planet Pain had been turned into a pirate-themed adult theme park called Pirates of the Painian Cluster. It was headed by none other than Captain Scrunched, mainly as he's invested in it as a way of selling more of his breakfast cereal, but also as he had fond memories of his time before being led away for 2 years for being a member of a pirate gang and having pirate memorabilia, namely his 3 peg legs, his eye patches, and the rum-preserved remains of what we can only assume was once a parrot. It is quite the tourist attraction, actually, and has about 13 films named after it too. I assume Captain Scrunch was a guy pirate, though he did respond to Polly a few times, and there was nothing left below his or her waist to identify either way except for a wooden... Well, anyway, he could have been a she, or she could have been a he, or both. Either way, Johnny Depp the 15th plays him in all of the movies, so it doesn't really matter much. Anyway, getting back to the current situation, things didn't quite go to plan with our negotiations with the pirate leaders, mainly as someone forgot to tell them that we were coming to negotiate with them, and possibly due to the fact that one of us may have let off a few shots, blowing up about 20 of their ships when they were questioning who we were. Now, I'm not saying that it was Callie, but the explosions did have a pretty yellow and black tinge to them, and she did say, well, that worked better than I'd hoped. Maybe next time I can go for their drive course to make pretty shapes when they go boom. She really is a liability sometimes, and sometimes she's just plain dangerous and counter to our survival. If it wasn't for the fact that she can cheer us up even in the darkest times, who am I kidding? We'd still want her around even then. She makes tense moments just that little bit more enjoyable. For instance, she's currently laughing maniacally and singing some song or other about a moth to a burning flame. Talking about singing at inappropriate times, that reminds me of the time that our mercenary group decided that we should all have our winter solstice celebrations in the demilitarized zone along the border between the Valkyrie's home fleet and the centre. We went along to check out the mixture of cultures that had created some of the most interesting architecture and world-building technologies that the galaxy had ever seen. That and the fact that apparently there were more houses and dens of inequity per person than anywhere else in the universe. We totally went there for the architecture. I mean, the supporting scaffolding that held up some of those cleavages was so impressive. You just had to spend time soaking in the sights. Anyway, we had just started to settle down and enjoy the architecture of this one group's corsetry when apparently the centre decided that they would launch a surprise attack against the Valkyrie fleet, which normally we wouldn't have minded about. But at that exact moment, some of the corseted ladies and gentlemen were performing a particularly impressive feat involving dancing and levitating over a fan, and the centre forces blew the power grid and caused a 13-dancer pile-up, and 6 of said dancers to die from booby and penile suffocation. This made our little group of 36 mercenaries very upset and annoyed, and the executive decision was taken that maybe now would be a good time for Callie to show off some of her explosive expertise. We proceeded to invade capital ship after capital ship, allowing Callie to do what she does best. Okay, maybe not what she does best. If she had done what she does best, we wouldn't have left the bedroom. I digress. She started blowing ships up like it was the 4th of June all over again, and the sky looked like some piece of expressionist art from the mid-20th century, what with the ships melting and buckling under the stresses and strains of the expanding explosions held within them. Some of the ships looked like frogs expanding their throats as the heat from the explosions forced the hulls to expand. Callie really is an artiste when it comes to explosions, destruction, and certain bedtime exploits. Though never believe her when she says she is an immaculate driver, she is far from it. In fact, there is literally nothing she does worse than driving. She somehow manages to hit everything along the road, and sometimes everything along collecting roads as well. But she did once manage to avoid being arrested by the peacekeepers by hiding in plain sight in the middle of a motorway. They kept driving up and down the motorway, trying to figure out how they could get to her, right up until they got bored and decided to go home. I kid you not, they gave up. I mean, all they had to do was get out of their cruisers and walk up to her to arrest her. But instead, they all wanted to chase her from the comfort of their cruisers and spent the whole time just cruising up and down the motorway, desperately trying to spook her out from the middle of the central reservation, which would have been possible if she hadn't been preoccupied with listening to her favourite Viking death metal band from the 21st century, Amon Amarth, extremely loudly, while making out with a certain handsome devil who shall not be named. It was me. I was the handsome devil. As I say, she can make even the most dire times fun and enjoyable. Oh yeah, where was I? Oh yes, singing at inappropriate times. Well, there we were, all enjoying the show of explosions that Callie had put on for us, when a bunch of peacekeepers turned it up and started arresting both sides, and anyone who was unlucky enough to have been present. We decided that while it would be fun to toy with the peacekeepers somewhat, that since they were being led by none other than Charlie, my loving and duty-bound third child, that we would try and hide from the peacekeeper force and sneak off planet and head to the next den of inequity that we came across, which would have been less than an hour's flight time from where we were. When I say there were a lot of these types of establishments, I mean it. I think this stretch of space, think of this stretch of space as being the most lawless and tightly bound part of the galaxy, filled with worlds full of nothing but nudie ladies and gentlemen, all dancing and performing various acts to the great amusement of all those who pay enough to watch, all enforced by the peacekeepers as part of their community engagement program, or pimping, as I like to call it. Anyway, there we were, all sneaking quietly, tiptoeing our way through the city on the way to our ship, when one of the peacekeeper ships landed right in our path. And who else gets out but dearest Charlie, her long, flowing black hair battered by the wind. She looked like some terrible vision of beauty, and takes way too much from her mother in terms of looks, and way too much from her father in terms of violent tendencies. Anyway, she was standing there flanked by the best of the best of the best of the peacekeeper elite troops, and possibly the biggest war beasts I have ever seen. Some genetic experiment that had obviously gone horribly wrong, as its proportions made it look like a cross between an elephant, a bear, a tiger, and a tank, which, to my great horror, Charlie was petting like a lapdog. This would normally have been the point where all of us dropped to the ground and started belly crawling past the wall that separated us from the beast that Charlie had with her. But Callie had other ideas and started singing, "For she's a jolly good fellow, for she's a jolly good fellow," as loud as she could, and jumping up and down and waving at Charlie. Fortunately for us, Charlie was in a good mood and waved back before catching herself and pretending that we weren't there, which caused the best of the best of the best elite troops some merriment and mirth, as they all tried desperately to pretend that there wasn't a group of dodgy-looking mercenaries tiptoeing their way past them in plain sight. Had Charlie been in a different mood, I'm pretty sure that we would have all have been done for. But I think that Charlie and Callie always did get on like a house on fire. Something to do with them both being short, and both being crazy about things that go boom. Come to think of it, Charlie gets on with her Aunt Callie better than she gets on with me. Actually, she gets on better with Aunt Callie than her mother Sybil. Anyway, inappropriate singing is one of Callie's endearing properties, and has often gotten us through many impossible odds. Talking of impossible odds, I must tell you about the time that me and Sybil were trapped in a bunker on one of the NPRD's mining planets. We had just survived another assassination attempt. This time by Sybil killing the fellow that came after us by smothering to death with a tortilla wrap she happened to have in close proximity. I did tell you that she can kill someone with pretty much anything she has at hand, right? Sybil once killed a guy with tissue paper, a bottle top, and a sliver of cheese. She's truly the most terrifying person I have ever met, especially with a sliver of cheese. Not to mention the time she murdered 12 guys with a broccoli. It wasn't even frozen broccoli. She worries me at how creative she gets with murdering capabilities and imaginative use of vegetables. Anyway, we'd gone on one of our little adventures wherein we took the navigation computer offline, then picked a likely looting star system, then hit the go button. we ended up in a sparsely populated, or rather looked sparsely populated mining system with nothing much of note, apart from a mining station which we surmised would have a great bar on it. So we took off and requested permission to land. We should have been at least a little worried about the situation we were about to find ourselves in, when the person who answered the call said, "What? Who did you say you were?" "Oh shit! Notify command, we found them!" As it were, we didn't pay them much attention, as the following conversation went something like this. "So, do you have a bar aboard that mining station?" Yes, sure, anything you want, just don't shoot." We took this as meaning an open bar. Plus, when someone says, "anything you want," you tend to forget the rest of the conversation. Without too much fuss, we docked with the mining vessel and proceeded to the nearest bar. Lovely thing. A bit kitsch, as it was an Irish-themed bar and had lots of stupid fiddle-dee-dee music playing. But the seats were nice, and the barmaids all had on excessively short green and white outfits, which had even Sybil interested. Mainly as she wanted to know if you could hide a weapon up one of those things. But I will take whatever sexual morsels I can get with her, as she mostly just tries to get me killed. She sure does love me. Anyway, we had this one lass sat across the table while I plied her with drink and coin, and Sybil kept creeping her hand up the girl's legs to see if there was a seam or other where a knife could be stowed, when we heard the familiar sound of a series of ships docking with the station. Turns out the girl's name was Siobhan, and was, in fact, Irish, and had been travelling around the galaxy on a kind of year out from her course. She also ended up being my 13th wife, and was actually really smart, and studying a course on the weaponization of asteroids, which led to her being Sybil's third wife. Siobhan, obviously enamoured with us, warned us that she had been told to keep us busy regardless of what we did while the MPRD could muster a force to capture us. But she could see that we were far more interesting, and that the pay sucked here anyway, and decided to warn us. So Sybil ordered some Mexican food, several drinks, and some salad, and I set about teaching Siobhan the finer points on how to shoot the small sidearm she turned out to have hidden between her legs flat against her. Anyway, she proved Sybil right in that you can literally hide a weapon up anything if you really wanted to. The first we saw of the encroaching troops was a unit who had clearly been given the wrong bar as a target, as they rushed into the sports bar next door and proceeded to shoot everyone in sight. I'm assuming that they went to the wrong bar. It could just have been that they really didn't like sports bars. Not that I would blame them. That is the last bar in the universe that I would be caught dead or alive in. Right next to trendy wine bars. I mean, who in their right mind wastes time choosing the right cheese to go with their fucking drinks? Everyone knows mature cheddar goes well with everything. Anyway, Siobhan was busy upturning tables and facing them all towards the door, when the first group of NPRD shock troops came rushing in, and by shock troops, I don't mean that they were the usual shock troops that just barge in and take everyone by surprise. No, these were the NPRD's finest shock troops. As in, they were all equipped with shock rifles and crowd control electric stun grenades. This was when Sybil showed us why she had ordered so many drinks just before the ensuing fight, by throwing the first couple of rounds over the shock troops, who, without thinking, opened fire, only to find out that they were all of a sudden then shocked troops. This then allowed Siobhan to show us that she was actually very handy with the little pistol she had hidden in her knickers. Even more handy with the blade she produced from her long, luscious red hair, and the 2 blades she had hidden in the heels of her dainty boots. She kind of looked like a spinning top of death and glory, which had me coloured impressed. This even got Sybil smiling. I proceeded to shoot the remaining troops, not wanting to be outdone, melting the remaining shocked troops with lethal precision. To which Siobhan tried to outdo me by launching headfirst into the second wave of shocked troops, who had opened fire without realising that the sprinkler system had all turned on, when the remains of the last wave had turned to a burning mess of goop on the floor. The NPRD were never known for their situational awareness when it came to warfare. I suppose this comes from basing your capital planet right next to a black hole. What ensued was a series of shooting competitions between me and Siobhan, with each of us trying to outdo the other's kill tally. All the while, Sybil sat looking at her watch under an air vent, tutting and tapping her feet impatiently. After the 13th wave of troops subsided and their corpses littered the floor from one side of the palisade to the other, Sybil suddenly stood up and, smiling, she said, "It's about bloody time!" To which me and Siobhan looked at one another before turning to chide Sybil on her lack of murderizing, when the air vent opened up and a guy dressed in all black dropped out of the vent and proceeded to get murdered by Sybil with what was left of her tortilla wrap that she had left on her plate. Why she chose that rather than the steak knife, butter knife, fork, gun at her side, combat knife in her boots, or even the metal spoons that was in the salad bowl is still a matter of hot debate, but she proceeded to murder him with the half-eaten tortilla. The look of surprise on his face was priceless, but at this both me and Siobhan looked at one another, then back at Sybil before saying in unison, "That still only counts as one." To which Sybil downheartedly said, "Oh, come on, that's at least a 10 for style." To which we all agreed that if we were marking style, Sybil would have won hands down, which of course meant that Sybil had won hands down. It's hard to argue with someone who had just killed someone with a half-eaten tortilla wrap. The next group that pushed their way into the palisade where the bars were located were all kitted out in armoured suits similar to the Peacekeeper armour unit. I'll start again. England? I speak England good. The next group that pushed their way into the palisade where the bars were located were all kitted out in armoured suits similar to the Peacekeeper Power armour suits, with one slight omission: paint. Yes, JSA, I do readings of books I've written occasionally. This made for a most imposing sight as these shining warriors came charging into the open palisades, before tripping unceremoniously over the bodies of their fallen compatriots and coming clashing and smashing to a halt in a pile in front of us. This was our cue to start heading for somewhere a little more secure, since the following charge was probably going to be led by the robotic dog monsters that the NPRD had also liberated from the Peacekeepers during the first of our many Peacekeeper wars, which I am in no way responsible for, despite many outstanding war crime tribunals. It was also at this point that Siobhan decided that, competition aside, now would be a good time to try and get our ship ready for when we arrived, and took a turn towards the airlocks, while me and Sybil calmly went towards mining vessels' storage area, where all of the precious metals were stored. I mean, the owners had clearly stated, "anything you want," which we took literally, as always. This was the point when the main force of the NPRD turned up. And, indeed, they were led by a large contingent of robotic death dogs, all being led by a guy who had an electrified whip. This led me and Sybil being trapped in the storehouse and completely outnumbered on all sides. If it hadn't been for the extra strength titanium door vault, we might have had more of an issue. The NPRD then tried to send in troops through the air vents, which led to Sybil again outdoing everyone present with her stylish murderizing techniques, which this time included at least 3 of the guys who came through the air vents being murdered with a slice of beetroot and a particularly lethal looking piece of lettuce. You may think I'm exaggerating, but truth be told, I will never look at salad in quite the same manner, and neither should you. That said, Sybil has somehow managed to ruin everything from custard tarts to paper clips, toothpicks to hairdryers, and tissue paper to lettuce leaves, with her lethal antics in one way or another. I swear I even saw her kill a guy with a dirty look once. She is truly amazing and truly terrifying all at the same time. She somehow manages to take something innocuous and innocent looking and find some awful manner in which it can be used to murder someone. It's one of the many reasons I married her. That and the immense and tightly controlled cleavage. Legs that go on for days, drop-dead gorgeous looks, and hair that in and of itself should be a registered weapon of mass destruction. We managed to block the air vents with the increasing pile of bodies that came tumbling through them, which was handy when they tried to gas us. The next stage of the siege was for the robotic death dogs to try and force their way into the room, which would have surely been the end of us, except for the fact that whomever programmed the robotic death dogs must have been a big dog fan, as they programmed in every aspect of a dog's personality, including the dog's ability to recognise the alpha, which was Sybil in this case, and for the robotic death dogs to be totally unable to resist playing fetch with the grenades that the accompanying dog's master kept trying to throw at us. The look on his face as he realised that the perfectly timed and perfectly cooked grenade he had just thrown into the room came waltzing back out in the mouth of one of his own dogs must have been priceless. I only wish I could have seen it. As it was, I was preoccupied at the time trying to figure out what was in all those large and ominous-looking barrels that happened to be piled up around the storehouse where we were currently situated. I soon realised that the storehouse we had taken up refuge in was the storehouse for the entire station's munitions supply. Thankfully, I realised this before I decided to try and shoot one of the barrels, as this would have been a very short and explosive mistake. Anyway, despite rumours to the contrary about the NPRD, they are not suicidal and set on their mission, success come what may. In fact, it turns out that when push comes to large explosions, the NPRD troops are just as fond of living as the next guy. They just like everyone to think that they are uncaring, egomaniacal psychopaths who would sell their grandmothers just for a chance at a fight, which, while mainly true, doesn't stop them from being afraid of a little thing called certain death, especially when that death involves death by either suffocation in the vacuum of space or the hot and melty-like death that comes from large quantities of explosives all going off at once. This led to them allowing us to leave while we brandished what looked like a detonator switch in one hand, which totally wasn't just the light switch from the storehouse, and a large quantity of valuable goods in the other. We got to the awaiting Siobhan and skedaddled away as quickly as our ship could muster, especially as I may or may not have left a timed explosive round in the storehouse. And this may or may not have detonated all of the munitions within the storehouse, which in turn ignited the gas cloud which the mining station was in, which in turn caused a chemical reaction on the gas giant that the station was orbiting, and may or may not have caused the entire thing to explode, killing over 7.5 billion NPRD mining, research and development staff who were all stationed at varying research stations located around the gas giant. Put it this way, Callie was deeply upset that she had missed the subsequent explosion, and to this day refuses to allow me to go on any further excursions alone with Sybil, just in case we blow up any more planets without her. This whole thing served the NPRD right for the poor choice of location for their explosive mining and research facilities, which again is in keeping for a civilization that has its home system located by a black hole, I suppose. Either way, we set their war efforts in the region back a few years, as it turned out that this was the only place near their home system that had a naturally occurring hydrogen gas giant, surrounded by the natural equivalent of gold and nitroglycerine ice asteroids. Surprisingly, this isn't the only place where that particular combination of highly explosive ingredients are naturally occurring. As unlikely as it may seem, there were in fact 3 systems. I say 3. We blew up one, Callie blew up another, and the last one blew up when an inconsiderate arse decided that littering an unoccupied system with the waste products from their weapons research program was a good idea, which Edie, my 8th wife, took umbrage with and detonated the whole shebang when they came for a 3rd time. How she knew that the centre's research and development division had been dumping waste products there, and how she knew that at that exact moment they would be dumping another batch is still beyond me. But a good deed should never go unpunished, as they say. Where was I? Oh, yes, the 1,000-strong pirate fleet that is chasing us currently. It turns out the old saying of cutting the head off of a snake doesn't always mean that the snake will die. In this particular case, cutting the head off of the snake, that is, killing the leader of the pirates, just made the remaining snake pieces very angry indeed, and much more bitey. It also turns out that sometimes pirate gangs are actually made up of democratically elected leaders. As bizarre as that might sound, sometimes even lowly, degenerate, good-for-nothings make the mistake of having a democracy too. I only wish I could have seen the election campaigns and subsequent debates. Just the thought of Pirate A standing up in front of his fellow pirates saying things like, "I promise to bring the tyranny of the peacekeepers down," to which Pirate B would say, "I promise to bring us wealth beyond measure," followed by Pirate C saying, "I will get us all blindingly drunk," which is why Pirate C was elected ruler, I assume. I mean, maybe they really wanted to elect an official who was dedicated to improving the waterworks on board their ships, lowering the levies on sanitary products for their pirates, and introducing better working hours. But I highly doubt it. Who knows? Maybe that was why they were so annoyed when we killed their leader. They were just really upset, as he was the only one who was going to reduce the heavy red tape associated with pirating. Did I ever tell you about the amount of red tape that is involved in being a pirate? I, as an outsider, had always assumed that pirates didn't bother with stupid things like paper trails, forms, or bureaucracy. But having worked in the Peacekeepers Infiltration Unit for 6 years, of which 5 were spent in deep cover in various pirate gangs, I discovered that actually pirates have an inordinate amount of bureaucracy to deal with. There's the permits for body modifications, permits for parrot modifications, daily quotas for raiding, intergalactic treaties to negotiate between gangs, and the registering of weapons with a centralized Pirate Empowerment Negotiation Unit Service, or PUS, to name but a small number of the layers of red tape pirates have to go through. It's no wonder pirates spend so much of their time drinking and are usually quite cranky. They're clearly overworked. They have so much paperwork because most pirates are in fact all part of a franchise, the largest of which is the Pirate Intergalactic Network of Headstrong Endangered Angler Dealers, or Pinheads, which has some strict branding requirements. This is one of the many reasons we usually let the independent pirate groups get away with so much in the Outersphere, especially as the Pinheads flatly refuse to pay any tax whatsoever on their income, using the excuse that actually no income is made in the Outersphere, and that in fact they run at a loss here due to rental of outfits, branding requirements, and paying the rental cost for intellectual properties. Very much like Starfucks, in fact, only less evil. As I say, always support your local criminal gangs. They at least pay taxes. Well, maybe not taxes, more bribes. Oh God. Derv is threatening to open a communication channel with the pirates in order to see if they will sell him some ramen. I'm seriously tempted to let him. Maybe they would lose interest in chasing us if they hear his voice for longer than 2 seconds. Actually, scratch that. They would just get even more annoyed and try to shoot us more than they already are. Maybe I could just jettison Derv with a loudspeaker. Damn, can't do that. In space, you cannot hear the deadening sound of his voice. Maybe I'll jettison myself. I did once jettison myself into space. It was a piece of tactical genius, if I may say so myself, and I can, since it's my story. We'd landed at a space station that was far outside the galactic rim. It was called Deep Space 6. It was owned and run by the Enterprise Federation. Not a bad group, really. They're a tiny bit obsessed with being good guys and ensuring that the frontline troops all wore red jerseys, which surely makes them easier targets in any fights. But other than that, they are a pretty nice group. The station was a staging post for the intergalactic travel network, and so was full of shops selling everything from ship supplies to duty-free cosmetics at exorbitant prices, which I guess is okay when you are literally floating in deep space and the nearest planet with a breathable atmosphere is 48 hours away at maximum speed, and the cost of maintaining a wormhole to another galaxy is hardly cheap, but they could at least offer frequent user discounts. We had docked there by accident, to be honest. We were kind of lost, as someone may or may not have left their cup of tea on the navigation computer and then knocked it onto said navigation computer, causing a fire, at which point that person may or may not have used the wrong fire extinguisher on the fire. I mean, it's a fire. How was I supposed to know that shooting water at a fire is bad when it's the wrong sort of fire? I didn't know fire came in different varieties other than hot and really fucking hot. You would think they would colour code fire extinguishers so you knew which one to use when on what type of fire, preferably with nice pictures to make it easy to, in a pinch, to decide which one to use. We had ended up at Deep Space 6 when, after failing to inform Sally the navigation computer may have been slightly off, she had punched in coordinates for somewhere near the galactic centre, and instead we ended up floating in the deepest, blackest, deadest part of the void between galaxies I had ever seen. I can't believe she was annoyed with me over that. She should have known that something was amiss, when instead of seeing more and more stars, we saw less and less. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you think about it. That's kind of like how some people trust the navigation computer when it says take a left here and end up being consumed by a sun. Just because the computer says turn here does not in fact mean it knows where the hell you are. Anyway, we were lucky enough to see the incredibly bright, blinking lights of the Deep Space 6 from about 32 light years away. They have a lot of advertisements floating around that station. In fact, I think half of the running costs of that place is the advertisements, to be honest. It was a good thing too, as we'd jumped in with only enough juice to get us about half of the way back. Sally docked us, and we immediately set about not spending any money on anything at all, as everything was way too expensive, and headed straight for the viewing lounge to watch the next wave of ships arrive through the wormhole. Everything was going great at this point. We had found safe harbour to refuel at. Derv was busy trying to convince the cosmetic shop that he'd like to get some of the proceeds of his haircare products sales early, which meant he was nowhere near me, and we were about to get a ringside seat of one of the most naturally beautiful space phenomena in the universe. And despite everything being incredibly expensive, it was almost perfect. So it's no surprise that the shit hit the fan, to be honest. As soon as the wormhole opened up, to many cheers and whoops from the gathered crowd, a fleet of ships appeared at its event horizon that should have immediately triggered my fight or fight dirty reflexes. But, as it happened, I was still kind of caught up in the moment and didn't notice the flags on the side of the incoming fleet. That or the fact that the lead ship was literally the shape of an erect penis, which should have given it away. The incoming fleet was almost entirely made up of Kardashians, a more vulgar and despicable group of urchins the universe has not seen, who also have an outstanding warrant for my arrest after I defiled their great temple at Caverny East by taking a dump in the sacred pool and watching as the head priest took a deep draught from it, before burning down their holy library of pop music and ass extensions. We only noticed that these particular turds in gold chainmail had arrived when the sound of shooting could be heard from down by the nearest clothing store. Obviously, the overpriced store had decided not to stock the great, most ass-holy Yee's already exorbitantly priced shoelaces, much to the High Commander's dismay, and so decided to take it out on everyone present by committing genocide. As I say, the Kardashians really are a big bag of dicks. We took it upon ourselves to stop said genocide, since we had a vested interest in getting to our ship. That and not being killed. We immediately started by making the viewing lounge as battle-hardened as one could, considering it was a huge open space with very little furniture other than the weird mechanised leather chairs that you have to pay to sit in. The Enterprise Federation really were experts at making people pay for shit they didn't normally pay for. It was also very difficult to harden the room much, since there was a huge wall of glass that was all that was stopping everyone from being sucked into deep space. Most places would have used force fields or huge screens to display the event, but the Enterprise Federation decided that those were all too expensive and so settled for the cheapest option. Well, not the cheapest. The cheapest would have been no glass and just standing in the void of space, but I guess even they had standards, plus the previous lawsuits that revolved around the few people who got sucked into the wormhole a few years earlier had put pay to that idea. We started by pulling up floor tiles and positioning them in places that may have taken fire, that shouldn't be allowed to take fire, i.e. we placed them up against the glass. We then decided that perhaps this wasn't the most tactically sound place to stand, and got everyone to start making their way in through engineering hatches that took us to the security wings and maintenance wings of the station. This turned out to be a very good idea, as the Kardashians rushed into the viewing hall just as we closed the hatches behind us. The sounds of god-awful singing, shots being fired, and people begging to be shot so that they didn't have to listen to the god-awful singing could be heard throughout the station. Thankfully, the Kardashians are also very stupid when it comes to the running of space stations, ships, planets, and toilets, since they have slaves that actually do all of the work for them. They didn't think that anyone would hide inside the engineering hatches, mainly as they didn't know what an engineering hatch was for and just thought it was aesthetically pleasing, and so didn't attempt to open them. It was at this point that the great and most holy Yi decided to make an appearance in the viewing lounge, where his minions had set up a makeshift throne room, where he started making decrees about his now owning the space station, and a whole bunch of other shit that I didn't pay too much attention to, mainly as I'd placed chewing gum in my ears to hide the sounds of that had been filling the air for the last 2 hours. Not the screams or the gunshots. Those didn't bother me much. I'm the Outersphere Warlord after all. No, it was that god-awful fucking singing that I couldn't take any more of. I even asked Derv to tell me about his trip had gone to the cosmetics store. I was so desperate to avoid the sounds of that fucking singing. It was at this point that I had the idea of shooting myself into space. Not that Derv made me want to commit suicide. No, far from it. He made me want to commit homicide. And when I want to commit homicide, I usually find some interesting manner in which to do it. This time my brain had been working on something since I had first heard the shots being fired. and that involved me shooting off into space. I headed for the nearest airlock and told Derv and Sally to make sure that the engineering hatches were locked tight. I jumped into the airlock and activated my "Oh shit, I'm in space" device. I don't know what it's called, it just works. And opened the airlock, forgetting to close the door behind me, leading to a few people being sucked into the blackness of space. But after fixing that, I started again and left the station for the space. Meanwhile, Derv and Sally turned off all of the advertising boards on the outside of the station and cut all of the power to the lighting systems throughout the station, resulting in the whole place being left pitch black. I floated there in space for a while, waiting for the total darkness to really make people concerned, and radioed for Derv and Sally to start tapping the pipes and doors loudly so as to get the Kardashians' attention. They did this, and apparently the Kardashians took this as a signal to start singing their national anthem, along with the beats. This resulted in several more suicides, but it gave me the cover I needed to get positioned in front of the viewing lounge in total darkness, without anyone being none the wiser. Then I radioed for Derv and Sally to activate the boards behind me and put up the message, "Kardashians suck," for all to see in the viewing lounge. As soon as this happened, the Kardashians all turned and looked at the signs and stood there, transfixed, trying to work out what "suck" meant, probably, as they really were not the sharpest tools in the broken and blunted tool pile. At this, the great and holy Yi noticed the light coming off my gun as it charged up. He apparently said something like, "The prophecy has come to pass. We will all ascend to the great pop library in the sky," and held his hands up in joyous tribulation, right as I fired and broke the glass. The sight of all the Kardashians' higher echelons being sucked out into space while I had ringside seat was wonderful. Right up until the horns that sounded the wormhole's opening blared. At which point I realised I had to get inside super fast or risk being spread less than an atom thick over the vastness of space. This was when Callie saved the day, having been woken up by the sound of an explosion, the viewing lounge's glass being popped. She'd looked out of her window and seen me floating there like a fish in the blackness of space, and seen that there was a fleet of Kardashian warships docked on the other side of me, and decided that I wasn't going to have all of the fun of attacking the ships myself, and so scooped me up in the shuttle before giving me a talking to about not including her in the explosions. I never corrected her. I never will. Her ego does just fine without being made aware of the fact that she inadvertently saved me. Unless she reads this, in which case, balls. Anyway, I think I heard Sally mention something about trying something fun. I sincerely hope it's something to do with why she has several grappling hooks under each arm and is giving me the look, as opposed to the fact that Callie is grinning from ear to ear and is holding 3 spacesuits and giving me the other look. This is going to be certainly interesting and probably explosive. No, it's Callie. It's definitely going to be explosive. Now onto something a little different. Chai, please. This next story is the reason I wrote the Outersphere Warlord Monologues. This is the fantasy novel, part of a trilogy that I have in my mind that I'm trying to get down on paper. Now, this is not comedy, although there are comic moments in it. But it is very much a work in progress. So any feedback from you guys would be eminently helpful. Ignore spelling mistakes, of which there will be many. But years. Chapter 1. A city stewing in its own iniquity, boiled in a cauldron of violence and hatred. The rain beats down on the mud-ridden streets. Windows and doors remain closed and dark. A moon nowhere to be seen. The figure holds his cloak close to him as he walks stiffly into the wind. Wet from the rain, his cloak looks more like a deep black than its custom dark green. It doesn't matter which street, which direction the traveller takes, the wind bites at his face. The rain drives down towards him, almost demanding him to stop. Push forward. Find a way. Thoughts of a warm fire and some dry place to sleep drive him onward. The swelling mud rises and flows like a thick river of tar. But as his impossibly clean boots touch the boiling mess, it hardens and solidifies, and he forges forward. The stench of hatred flows from every door. Every darkened window holds malice towards him. Onwards, he pushes, holding his cloak tight against the wind and rain. Ignore them. They cannot see what we see. The scent changes as he moves. The smell of fire and ale fills the air. Badly cooked meat and poorly spiced stale stew. It's like heaven. When was the last time he ate? Must have been 3 days past, maybe more. Time has no meaning when you're unaware of anything but your own thoughts. No, time is your own, together as one. The sound of muted voices, undistinguishable against the hard thrum of rain. Over the din, a lone violin pushes through the cold, wet night air towards him. The dim light from the door shows him that this is the inn he could taste on the air around him. The door reads, "No trolls, no werewolves, no dwarves." Racism is rife here. This whole kingdom reels from the last war and will reel from the next and the next. Whomever upsets the king and queen will be the new target of derision, all previous transgression forgotten as a fresh enemy looms. Bigots! Fools! They deserve this. He pauses for breath at an oak door, far more lavish than the street gives credit, but nevertheless mud-splattered and rusted. Markings on the door suggest it's owned by a vampire clan from the east. Runes suggest it's run by a northern tribe. A strange mix, but not unheard of here in the Central Plains. He pushes against the door. It opens easily, well oiled from years of use. The smells of those below waft through the open door. The voices climb and clatter as he descends the stairs. Well worn by leather and steel, the stone speaks to him. He allows the hood of his cloak to slip from his head. Heavy and wet, his hair hangs tangled, ill-kept, a dark red from the rain. As he nears the bottom of the steps, the conversation becomes coherent.
"I told him that's just the way it is, and he swore he could pay. He paid all right. Scummy dwarves."
A deep, gruff voice is boasting.
"Why don't we change the subject? I'm sick about hearing 'em."
A higher-up but equally gruff voice clears the air. As he enters the main room, 2 guards are standing at the bar talking. The owners of the gruff voices, it seems. Ogres, part of the city guard. Uncompromising and corrupt to the core. Makes good guards as long as they're paid enough. And they make sure that they are paid plenty, usually in bribes and protection money. Fantastic system of control. The guards are the criminals, and they ensure no other organised gangs can move in. This leaves the rich to themselves, and the poor are kept in check. A barman is fat and bald, red-faced. The barman is fat and bald and red-faced and keeps his eyes down. A half-breed cleans the tables, while a wiry man plays the violin next to a sign that states in bold letters, "Always pay the piper." The fire is raging gently to itself, untended and ill-kept, but defiant and warm. Kill them! Burn them! Let us free! I'll take a bowl of whatever you're cooking, a flagon of mead, and a bed for the night, please, barkeep. 3 gold coins slide towards the barman as the traveller takes a seat by the fire.
What's your name, stranger? Where do you hail from?
The barman looks darkly and with contempt towards the stranger. Elsewhere, comes the only response. The barman huffs to himself, grabs the coins, and begins slopping the food from the cauldron by the bar into a wooden bowl. He leaves it next to the bar. He leaves it at the bar next to the mead before the half-breed walks over, collects them, and brings them to his table. She smiles. Here you go. Don't mind them. Rough week. When is it ever anything else? As the half-breed walks away, he sees the end of a stump from where they docked her tail. Half lizard, half human. Can't have been pleasant being brought up here. His eyes turn towards the wiry man in the corner. He is playing as though his last meal depended on it. Gaunt and torn, a small, well-worn dagger at his side suggests a wandering bard. The violin is the only well-kept thing about him, and he cradles it like a lost love. Many would dismiss the scene, but questions fill his head. Quelling his curiosity, he turns back to the meal before him. Keep an eye on them. We do not trust them. He begins inspecting the food. Stirring the slimy stew with the spoon reveals several small, scrappy dumplings floating deep within the green and brown, muddy water. A few carrots and some potato float idly, as if avoiding them, and something akin to strips of meat seem to cling to the sides of the bowl as if attempting to save themselves from drowning. He reaches out to the fire. A flame wafts to his fingers, dances there for a moment before darting over his food. The food begins to boil. He reaches into his cloak and pulls some spices and sprinkles them across the food. He stirs, then eats. Heaven, home, sustenance. The mead is warm and sticky, kept not 2 feet from the cauldron. He closes his eyes. Ice envelops his hands. The mead chills and begins smoking with a cold mist. After cracking the ice from his fingers, he takes a deep draught. Sucker, refreshing, intoxicating. After finishing the food and draining the mead, the stranger notices a ranger sitting in the corner, her head pulled over, half covering her face, but her eyes piercing the rooms like the arrows at her side. Sharp and concentrated, she watches the guards. Her face is scarred from over one eye down to her left cheek. It doesn't affect the intense beauty in her deep red eyes. Her face, that of an angel. Her demeanour, that of a seasoned warrior. Her cloak is the deepest green like his own, held closed with the same emerald clasp in the shape of a dragon holding a spear in its teeth, a symbol of high military status in the northern realms. Her top a deep red with a black basque. Her figure is divine. Her hair, the darkest black tipped with a hot red, falls from underneath her hood and seems to extenuate her chest. Her skin is soft and smooth, pale as the moon. She was a fighter, scars to prove it, and bitterness ran deep within her soul. She could have been a princess in another life. The poise, that of an aristocrat, master of all she surveyed, but life had treated her as she treated it, harsh and hard. Beauty unsurpassed, queen of all we see. The large ogre calls to the barkeep.
One last round for the ode, Olaf, and put it on the stranger's tab. Call it the new face tax.
The smaller ogre looks over his shoulder, almost expecting trouble. The larger hits his shoulder.
Who's going to mess with us? Only one bigger than us is the captain, and he's busy on the other side of town.
The smaller one smiles, his rotten teeth a story of his runt status. The larger one looks towards the barkeep as he places another drink in front of the two guards. He smiles, but unlike his subordinate, his teeth are black as coal and solid, all bar from one missing tooth in the side of his jaw. A gash runs across his neck. A lucky strike maybe, but not deep enough to pierce his hide, but certainly deep enough for a cause for someone to get a mighty beating. The angle of the cut is from someone low down, probably the dwarf they were talking about earlier. As the ogre reaches for the flagon in front of him, his hands are caked in the thick, dried crust of blood, hair, and bits of bone and teeth. The dwarf must not have paid enough, or at least not enough to excuse the gash.
Bastards! Why do we let them live?
The ogres shift in their seats as they drink, their swords rattling against the chairs. Each sword looks as though it's rusted shut, simply there for show. The scabbard looks like it could do more damage than what must be left of the blade housed within. The ranger in the corner stirs briefly, shifting her weight. He can see her intention. The guards may be ogres, but she would tear them to pieces before they could bring their rusty blades to work. Something in the air stirs nearby. She is here too. If we do not kill them, she will. Oh, goddess of death! He stands and reaches towards the fire. A shot of flame stretches to meet him. He moves closer to the fire, bringing his chair and table with him, before sitting and purposefully stroking the flicker into a ball in his palm. The heat from his hands singed the table as he now begins forming it, moving it, malleable like clay in his hands. The intense heat dries his hair and the sleeves of his shirt as he closes his hands around it, hiding it from view briefly. He opens his hands to reveal a blue-flamed winged horse. It walks across the table in front of him, no bigger than his bowl. Its hooves burn small pinpricks on the table as it moves. He waves a hand over the damage, repaired and buffed, and much cleaner than before. The table's sheen glints from the flames of the creature. The ranger has shifted her vision to him now. He looks at her, shakes his head and looks at the fire. She nods, understanding.
Spoil sport. That would have been fun to watch.
The guards finish their drinks and stand to leave. She watches them closely, her hand on her blade as they pass, theirs on their own. They laugh and leave. She shifts her attention back to him, stands and walks calmly to his table. The winged horse stamps and scrapes at the table, huffing and snorting as she approaches. He strokes its fiery mane and it calms. She makes no sound as she approaches. His eyes are firmly on the creature now stood preening itself at his table. I could have taken them, Diamond. They wouldn't have stood a chance, she rasps. Yes, but we're new here, and you would have brought the whole building down on top of us. Besides, other than being too nosy and thinking he could catch a ranger unawares, what has the barman done to deserve being a target? He gestures towards the bar. The barman relaxes his grip on something below the bar and smiles warily at her. His face is crime enough, surely, she sighs. Fine. Her left hand returns a throwing dagger back to its holster inside her cloak. Fucking guild, she spits under her breath. Nina, calm down. We stay the night and move on once we know what we're here for. Vane wouldn't have stopped me. You're always so restrictive, Jammin. Why can't we just kill them all? It's not like they don't fucking deserve it. Fucking guild. She doesn't mean what she says, he can see that, but she has a point. They do deserve it. Plus, it would have been a glorious end to a dreary journey. Nisha should be here soon. She was tending to the horses. Nina looks towards the door. Her demeanour more relaxed with the guards gone. Do you think she'll have any trouble? I think we should speak to the owners. Ignoring her concern, he waves at the barman to come over. Where are the owners? We need to talk. Talk is cheap. Let us free. The barman, momentarily taken aback, looks towards a large black door made of dark steel, hard and impenetrable, strong enough to hold off a dragon for a while at least. He looks back. I am the owner. He looks concerned as he reaches for a blade on his belt. 12 feet apart, but Nina's beside him, sword at his throat, in a blink of an eye. The candles next to the barman don't even stir. Calmly does it there, fella. Wouldn't want you to slip on your own pig sticker, would you? She smiles. Her eyes flash. Her fangs glisten in her smile. Diamond whispers under his breath as he turns to the fire. You should listen to her. She hasn't fed in weeks. Sorry, miss. I didn't realise. I'll get her right away. Smarter than he looks, at least. Not smart enough, though. The barman makes for the blackened door, slowly backing away from the apparition before him. Nina lowers her blood-red blade back to its sheath, while her eyes firmly pierce his movements. She lets it sit there for a while, as if waiting for an invite to use it once more. The barman starts to fumble for a key from around his neck while maintaining a fearful little eye on her. Who shall I say is calling, sir? The barman, clearly as fearful of the door as he is of Nina's blade, looks for any excuse to avoid disturbing his mistress. Diamond doesn't even lift his eyes from the fire. Just tell her the cursed half-breeds are here. He waves to the creature on the table. It stretches, flexing muscles made of flame, extends its wings, stretching them for the first time in its short life. The creature takes to the air, dancing from air current to air current within the room, flittering like a butterfly, but as sure as if it had done so for an eternity. Diamond waves towards the barman. The creature circles Diamond twice before sweeping towards the startled man. Don't worry, it won't bite, as long as you do as I say. The barman feels the heat of the creature now inches from his face. Like looking into a blacksmith's forge, the heat is intense and glorious. The creature flashes green, then back to blue. The flames seem to knit and mould into a fur. The light dims as the heat subsides. The blue of the flames give way to white fur with blue swirling patterns lightly visible. The creature now comes to rest on the barman's robes. Fearful, he flinches, half expecting it or himself to burst into flames. After neither happens, he calms somewhat, but keeps his head to one side, fearful of each move the creature makes. The creature seems unfazed by the movements of the oaf it now perches on. The black door creaks and whines as it is opened. The barman disappears hurriedly into the dark beyond. As the door closes shut with a clank, the half-breed hurries behind the bar. The bard, too intent on playing, continues. As Nina rejoins Diamond at the table, she watches the door intently, as if waiting for assailants to pour forth, not with fear, but with a distinct longing. After a while, disappointed, she returns her gaze to him as the locks creak shut. She loves to fight. Why spoil her and our fun? Nisha should be here shortly. I should get her a drink from the bar. Nina's concern breaks the intensity on her face briefly. She's already here. Diamond watches as the shifting air begins to swirl around into the shape of brilliant white wings before them. As something begins to coalesce into vision, wings unfold from around a figure in front of them. They open in a brilliant light before the figure of a woman in white steps forward from the light, shakes her wings, and water sprinkles to the ground around her. She folds them back, disappearing in a swirl of mist and heated haze. It is as if they never existed. She looks about her. Her skin is pristine, deep blue eyes shocking against her dark skin. Her hair looks as though she just left a parlour, her clothes untouched. Her cloak is silvery in hue, with a similar clasp holding it shut as Diamond and Nina's. The only difference, instead of holding a spear in its mouth, the dragon clasp holds an orb of obsidian, and in each hand the dragon holds a sceptre topped with emeralds and rubies, denoting both royalty and membership of the highest order of northern mages. Another goddess grants us her presence. Goddess of life, sister to death. Trouble? She smiles at Nina and Diamond. You should know you got here before me. Diamond smiles. Nina tries to hold her composure before submitting to a laugh. How can you tell when she's here? I'm her sister and I can never tell. I give up with you two. She motions to the half-breed, now almost shaking from fear. Bring me and my dearest sister something sweet to drink, but clean the glasses. Turning to Nisha with a glare. Unless your high and mightiness has already drank all of the liquor back there. She holds Nisha's gaze with a glare before bursting into laughter again. Nisha smiles coyly before sticking her tongue out. Although sisters, they have always been the closest of friends. Their personalities as distinct as their skin colour. Nisha was brought up by their mother, Nina by their father. One trained for frontline combat and the other for long-distance support. The two sides of a brutal strike force. Nisha sits with Diamond. Her clothes look as untouched as her skin, perfect in every way. Diamond's gaze is shifted for the first time to her. She smiles. Nina punches Diamond's arm. Get a room! Done and pay for, he says, reeling from the expected follow-up. It never comes. Nina is too busy looking at the half-breed as she approaches the table. See? The illusion falls. We told you not to trust them. The half-breed's eyes are different now. She doesn't have the intrigue and puzzlement Diamond saw when he first spoke to her. She now seems more composed, unfazed by the actions and happenstance. She now walks as if the world was hers. She moves her hair over her shoulder, and she almost swaggers with confidence. Diamond notices the music has stopped. The bard is sat glaring at the visitors, not with malice, but as if they had just walked in on some twisted role play and now he must return to stark reality. The half-breed stands, her hands on her hips. Her voice is clear and unfazed. My lady will see you now. I'm sorry for the ruse. The barkeep is there to distract unwanted attention, and I and the bard are the true guardians of the door here. We recognized you as soon as you walked in, although I was told to expect 4, not 3, and definitely not Neholim. Looking towards Nisha and Nina, she avoids their gaze. Diamond, you sure this is okay? Nina starts to glide her hands towards her blade again. The half-breed backs a little. Diamond's hand stows her and eases Nina's hand to the table. I was wondering when the ruse was going to end. I thought you may have let it continue till that poor man in the other room collapsed from fear. Diamond's face remains still and calm. The half-breed glances towards the doorway. He plays his part. He's well looked after, so a little teasing is okay. Now 4.
Let us show her our glory. Let us teach them their place.
Turning back, she fixes her gaze upon Diamond. He's here too. Trust me, you won't meet him unless things go from bad to worse. Nina huffs to herself, a tinge of aristocrat on her voice. The inner princess. When does she want to meet us? Nisha waits for a name. Ella of the Moon. Ella for short. The wiry fella's just called Bard. He sings and plays but never speaks. Some stupid oath he took when he came to work here. Ella snorts towards the Bard. The Bard's eyes flash, and in as theatrical manner as he can muster. Bows, holding the bow of his violin out to accentuate the move. Standing back up, he places his bow on his violin and begins to play. Cheerful tones fill the air. The black door now slides rather than opens. A different room beyond appears. The room is all lit by warm green hues. Smoke bellows forth from 2 large shishas sitting in the middle of the room. Several vampires sit cross-legged in a trance, puffing on the apple-smelling tobacco. Some drug from the east, sickly sweet, with a tinge of metallic to the smell. Diamond recognizes the smell. Elf blood-soaked tobacco. A specialty drug just for vampires. Makes them descend into a fever-like trance, inducing hallucinations and hunger, while relaxing them as though they have just fed.
Now this is more promising. We could enjoy this fight more.
Diamond, Nisha and Nina stand and follow Ella through the door. The bard plays once again. This time the sound is soulful and wanting. The doors close behind them as they enter the room. The room begins to expand. The hanging drapes are pulled back, revealing a busy and full club. Vampires, werewolves, dwarves, lizard men, half-breeds of various shapes and sizes, trolls, ogres, and elves. All of them seem to be here, drinking, smoking, injecting, or eating. They all seem oblivious to the new faces among them. A band plays on stage, raised in the middle of the room. Guitars, drums, flutes, and violins all locked in an embrace around the voice of a young woman sat across a red cushion in the middle of the stage. Her hair is the deepest blue, her skin the palest white. Her eyes flash with a deep green. She wears a simple red skirt topped with green. Her top is similarly simple and hangs loosely about her. Her hands are ornately decorated with henna. The designs are intricate and purposeful. The music seems to sweep across every person there like a wave of passion. That should be sway and sweep. Oops. A wave of passion. Diamond recognizes the witchcraft. It's used to entertain the club-goers, but rather than the false forcing of the situation, it's a beautiful combination of the general feeling in the room and the witch's wishes for everyone there. She's stroking everyone's auras, calming and exciting their passions for all that is on offer. She is an auramancer, rare, but in a city this large, not unlikely, Diamond thinks. There is more to her than meets the eye. The eyes of a master, no doubt. In one corner, an ogre takes an ornate vial from an obsidian box. A blue, shiny liquid is pressing against the top of the vial, almost pushing to escape from the stopper. The troll pushes the vial into a golden syringe, the needle of which is clear like glass. The troll takes the syringe and presses hard against the side of his head, pushing it deep into his temple. As he pulls the syringe plunger out, the deep red of his blood fills the clear needle. The blue liquid, almost alive, shoots towards the blood and turns the whole vial black. The troll then presses the syringe slowly, pushing the black viscous liquid into his temple. Slowly at first, then speeding up. As he does this, his other hand begins to shake. He grits his teeth, and his eyes flash blue. He tenses up before slumping back into his seat, the syringe still protruding from his temple. He begins to slip sideways. A real danger that he will land on the syringe is overcome when a wraith's smoky hand appears next to him. Reaching up, the wraith pulls the syringe unceremoniously out of the troll's head before placing it back into the golden box. The wraith gently lowers the twitching troll down onto the seat. The box gently rises as the wraith's ethereal body carries it to the next table, full of eager customers. Diamond shifts his eyes to the dance floor where a wizard holds a female troll's hand as he floats her around the dance floor. It's an impossibly graceful dance between a waifish man and the burly troll. She smiles and watches his every move. He smiles back. No one else in the room to them. They are alone in their moment. Okay, no, so maybe not all bad. Diamond smiles and returns his gaze back to the witch. She has seen him. Her song becomes different, almost drawn. She clears her throat, and the band take up the slack. She begins to raise herself from her cushion. Slow and deliberate, she begins to move towards the back room. Her eyes firmly locked on Diamond, she hurries as if summoned. She sees us. No, not us. But she knows there is more to see than just you. The half-breed follows the auramancer through the plain black door at the back of the room. Beyond is a room full of mirrors surrounding a golden desk, with emerald dragons embossed on the legs, with rubies and diamonds for eyes. Diamond smiles when he sees the white and blue winged creature sat in the middle of the table, quietly eating a large piece of peach. The creature looks towards him, snorts, and returns its attention to the peach. We're not alone here. Something watches us. Beautiful pyromancy, I must say, Diamond. I heard you were capable, but giving life so easily you must never get lonely. The woman sits at the desk behind a wall of papers, the only clear part of the table reserved for the winged horse and its peach dinner. The witch is whispering into the woman's ears. She raises her hands and motions for the door. It's okay. I know all about him. Or as much as I need to anyway. The witch hurries for the door. Catching Diamond's eyes before seeing the reaction of Nisha, she smiles, looks away and hurries past. Nisha follows her with a firm look that says, "Try it." Nina, oblivious, is more interested in the creature on the table. Typical. More interested in food than actual work. Definitely one of yours, Diamond. Her face showing a little of the humour it had earlier, she now holds her posture and returns to her motionless, hard and guarded posture. Our rock, our queen. The woman behind the desk begins to stand. Diamond bows a little out of politeness. Nisha and Nina stand firm. The woman's dress seems to waft with the air. The finest silk makes no sound as she beckons for the three to sit. Made of white silk with a delicate pattern in blue adorns and clings to her figure. A black shawl hangs at her bare shoulders. Her hair, a brilliant white with streaks of purple, covers over half of her face. She beckons again towards the chair in front of her. Diamond and Nisha move to sit. Nina leans defiantly against the door frame as the door behind them closes shut. All sounds from the room beyond disappear. Obvious wards keep unwanted sounds from entering or leaving. They glow as they begin to activate, flash golden in color, then disappear from view. We shouldn't be bothered now. Her voice is calm, soft, and exotic, but she stumbles a little with the language. I would like to apologize about the welcome. We were not expecting you till next week. I'm glad the journey was swift, but you must understand the barman was doing his job. The last comment clearly directed towards Nina, who huffs, trying to not look in the woman's direction, but finding all the mirrors seem to point towards her. So she starts to inspect the black scabbard of a plain dagger she nonchalantly takes from her cloak. The woman brushes her hair from her face. In the mirror, she is beautiful. Her face is seamless and harsh. But as Diamond moves his vision back to her, half of her face is scarred from an old burn. Diamond smiles at her, ignoring the scars and implanting the image he has seen in the mirror over the one he sees before him. The woman notices a momentary slip in his concentration and momentarily loses eye contact. Did he see my true face? I see the rumors about you are true. I'm glad to meet all four of you. She smiles as if revealing something that they had wished kept secret.
She thinks she has us all figured out. Pride becomes before a fall.
Diamond, unfazed, simply smiles. We are happy to be here. Shall we dispense with the pleasantries? You have a snake problem. She smiles. Farah. My name is Farah Solasbane. She smiles, offering her hand towards Diamond. Nisha seizes it and smiles a hard, forced smile. Nisha, and this is my sister Nina. She beckons towards Nina, who simply ignores her, still faking being fascinated by her dagger. She can't stand to look at this woman's face. She too can see the scars. They remind her of her own mother's. Nisha, oblivious, looks back smiling, gritting her teeth beneath the smile. Vane is here, but he is sleeping. You don't need to speak with him, right? Nisha's words demand the answer of no, and Farah obliges against her own curiosity. Farah releases Nisha's hand, smiling back. Nisha, in turn, seeing the situation is turning to business, settles back into her chair. Her left hand settles on Diamon's right. Their fingers touch. Diamond gives her a slight, reassuring squeeze as he smiles at her in a glance that says all she needs to see. Farah allows her hand to stroke the creature eating its peach meal in front of her. It responds with a snort and lets out a loud belch. Surprised, she smiles and returns her gaze back to Diamond. I had expected you all a few days from now. Some business you had tied up from what I was led to believe from my contacts in Vir. Her voice ends as if asking a question, but her facial expression belies that she expects no answer, and none is given. She pauses before continuing. We have a brood of the snakes, as you call them, moved into the city. They have taken up residence in one of the other clubs in a more wealthy part of town. I suppose they think this will protect them. I would assume you will show them the folly of their confidence. Farah loses her smile as she continues, her face becoming stern and cold. We have had several of the city guard disappear looking into their activities, as well as some of my own people. Their bodies never turn up, but I am sure of their demise. Eaten, no doubt, or worse. Farah pauses for a moment as the creature before her now stretches and takes flight once again, flitting from air current to air current before landing on Diamond's open hand. It briefly bursts into green and blue flame once again upon contact with his skin, but settles back into its now familiar white and blue as it curls to sleep in his palm. A little annoyed that her temporary pet has gone back, the woman continues, I can tell you that they have several high-ranking officials in their back pockets. They have also bought several sorcerers to enchant their club in which they now reside. They came by boat in the night and set up almost immediately. I assume this means they have had people here for weeks beforehand, but they have bribed their way to staying under the radar. She looks from face to face. Yaman holds her gaze as he replies, It's likely they've been here for months, not weeks. The process of bribing officials isn't something that happens in a short time if you want to avoid attention. Their agents are likely mingling with high society. Have you seen any new faces, or any that may have suddenly become popular within those circles? Farah thinks for a moment. I can think of two in particular. Well-established families that until recently had fallen out of favor with the other families due to their debt problems have within the last year paid up in full and become the belle of the ball, as it were. I had thought that maybe their business dealings had improved, but what you say makes sense. So Erdites have funded their return to grace. Likely, came Nina's response, dropping her pretense. She allows herself to gaze on the woman's face. The scars down one side of her face begin to swirl and cloud, as if the skin were repairing itself before her eyes. Farah's magic must be adjusting to hide the scars from prying eyes. Relieved that she would no longer see the scars, Nina allows her face to relax a little. Farah returns her gaze with a smile. This should be made privy to certain parties that I have until now been trading information to them. I shall pass this on right away. How do you want us to deal with them? Direct or clandestine? Nina allows herself to show which she prefers by pronouncing clandestine syllable by syllable while pulling a face that states disgust. However you feel, we just don't want what happened in Veer to happen here. We are well settled and don't need snakeheads mixing their business and political dealing with our own. Just make sure their queen is dealt with. I don't want her slithering off to come back at a later date. Farah's voice becomes stern, her magic slipping enough for Nisha to finally notice the scars, and Nina to go back to looking at her dagger. Diamond intercedes. We're aware of their tendency to hold grudges. Believe me when I say she will not be returning to the light anytime soon. We certainly appreciate the need to ensure that they don't get a foothold on the Central Plains. Or breathing the same air as us, vile, power-hungry, backstabbing bastards! Much like the Guild. Farah gathers herself somewhat at his words. Understanding the reputation that these four bring, she manages to control her composure. Farah then notices Nisha's concern. I'm sorry you saw that. I have experienced erudite vengeance before, as you saw. I try and keep others from seeing this. Most can't, but emotions still get the better of me even now. Nisha smiles almost apologetically. I can help there if you would permit me. Farah smiles back, shaking her head. No, it is a reminder to ensure my enemies are dealt with in the entirety. But I sincerely thank you. Nisha's smile eases Farah's concern. Her magic now swells and conceals the scars from even Nina's eyes. Nina reaches out and places a hand on Nisha's shoulder. It is comforting but firm. Let it go. She has her reasons. Nina whispers almost without thought for the others in the room. Nina returns to her perch against the wall, leaning as if almost holding the walls upright. She returns her gaze back to her nails and dagger. Diamond thinks for a moment.
Let us bring the city to the ground. Let us cleanse the streets with blood. Let us free.
He takes a sigh before continuing. I think we shall start by finding out how far their influence goes, then we shall decide how best to proceed. I also have my own reasons for ensuring a total elimination of their influence. Trust we shall deal with this threat as if it were our own. I shall need introductions and someone we can converse with who shall not draw attention towards yourself or your establishment. This limits your involvement from outside eyes, as I'm sure you would prefer.
Damn it. I guess we could do it your way, at least for now.
Diamond's demeanour is cold, brittle, and almost automatic. I was thinking the witch who sings for you. I assume she has your blessings as your agent in this matter? Farah nods and waves her hand. The door to the club opens. The witch enters into the room, bowed. Yes, my lady. She bites her bottom lip, awaiting the response. Chiara, you will be my eyes in this. Diamond and his group are beyond reproach. Do as they request. Show them to their rooms. Farah now turns her attention back to the three before her. I'm sure you wish to wash your travels from you. Get some rest before continuing. Diamond smiles. That would be appreciated. Diamond and Nisha stand. Nisha relaxes her hold on the wall as they begin to move towards the door. Diamond moves his hand to his shoulder. The creature sleepily moves to settle on its new perch. As he does, Farah questions as they leave. You made no mention of payment.
Payment? You would pay
pay us to do this?
We do this for the fun of it.
Yaman stops without looking back. We will take what we want from their vault. Anything left will be yours. If you want to add more, I'm sure whatever else you want to add will be welcome, but unnecessary. They all leave, following the witch's lead. Farah smiles to herself. As advertised and promised, should be interesting to see them work. A voice from behind her speaks in a whisper. It will be a bloodbath. They are dangerous. Do not give them reason to change their minds. She smiles once more without turning. He knew you were there. If he had taken offense, you would be dead by now. The shadow moves in the mirrors behind her. Yes, but you too would have ended right there. Take caution. They're called the cursed half-breeds for a reason. Many who underestimate them end up with the same fate. My employers wish for this to go as smoothly as possible. Farah's face winces at the term employers, but she smiles again. If death becomes my fate, at least it will be an interesting experience. We shall walk that path if needs be, but the Erdites must not get access to the Central Plains. This would be most unfortunate situation, even for your employers. A cold hiss from the mirror is the only response. Thank you for tuning in. Take care, look after yourselves, and as always, be good. And if you can't be good, don't give the snakeheads our address. Till then, peace. And as always, feel free to check out the links in the description below for access to the merch store. You can also find our books available on Amazon.